Crash! John jumped in surprise as he heard something fall on the other side of the room. He looked around, remembering that he was all alone in the room. He had placed the broom by the door after sweeping and was fully absorbed in his research project. He was a tall man, about 30 years old. His hair was dark black and cut short to his head. He wore a white lab coat and was every inch the stereotypical scientist, about which his friends, or what few friends he had, never hesitated to remind him. As he peered across the room to the door, he watched it slowly opening. Who could be here at this late hour? Who would bother him in the middle of his project? He became infuriated that somebody would dare interrupt his work. As these thoughts ran through his head, the figure finally walked in the door. It was his lab assistant. Of course, he thought, feeling the infuriation he had experienced a moment before slowly dissipate and melt into pure sexual attraction. His assistant, Ashley, was a gorgeous woman, only a few years younger than him. She was thin and beautiful. She would never know that he had feelings for her. She could never know. It could jeopardize their working relationship, and then he would have to find a suitable replacement. Unfortunately, she was the only suitable assistant that he'd been able to find. Her IQ was only 3 points higher than his. Part of him was jealous, but the other part had a deep appreciation for how her mind made connections that his might not have made as quickly. He was just making excuses again. Of course they could be together. And she had expressed some interest in him in the past. Why couldn't he bring himself to tell her how he felt? His thoughts and eyes were brought back to her face with an immediate snap as she greeted him. He hoped she hadn't noticed exactly where his eyes had drifted, but as usual, her sly smile implied she knew exactly where they were. He heard her voice shaking with something. Anticipation? Fear? Excitement? John, I just made the most amazing discovery. This has implications that will change the project forever, she said. What is it? What did you find? I just came across this paper. It says it was written by Dr. Barnes, but I've talked to colleagues in the field and they said that it probably wasn't his. Either way, what it contains is still immensely useful. We're going to be famous, John. I'm telling you. This is going to change the project. Well, don't keep me in suspense. Tell me what you found, he said. Ashley replied, according to this research paper, cancer cells operate in a completely different way than we suspected. This paper could be the link we needed to solve it. If you look here on page 64, it says, if the sick person eats the bark of a pine tree and then drinks 6 fluid ounces of water exactly 15 minutes after eating the bark, after 3 days, their cancer will be cured. Stunned silence. John couldn't believe what he was hearing, but he was determined to give her the benefit of the doubt. There must be some logical reason why she thinks this might work. Maybe I don't have the full story, he thought to himself. Well, did you test it, he asked. Of course not. There's no need for testing, she replied. Why not? Because a little further into the research paper, if you look on page 73, you'll see it says that there's no need for testing. That's ridiculous, he said. We should test everything, and I don't see how this could possibly work. Well, with an attitude like that, it won't work. The paper says that Dr. Barnes will not be tested. If you try to run the tests under lab conditions, it won't work. This is ridiculous, Ashley. We don't even know exactly who wrote the paper. How can we possibly trust it? He said as his face grew redder and redder. He couldn't believe she was being so ridiculous. To think that there was a paper out there that could bamboozle somebody so thoroughly was infuriating. Especially Ashley. How could she have been so fooled, he thought to himself. Not allowed to test the conditions? Not allowed to question it? We don't even know who wrote the damn thing. What use is this information? He finally gained control of himself again. Okay, Ashley, if it'll make you happy, I'll read the paper and think about it honestly. Thank you, John. I appreciate that, she said. No promises, Ashley. I'm not going to believe anything without some sort of evidence. I have to go to church now. I'll read it when I get home tonight. The Bible always comes first.